exceptional Randos show is produced live in a studio audience with a captive audience of 3 cats and a dog. And can't even say the rest. So I'm not sure what the big news this week is. I read that that somebody who was recently promoted to like a department head or something at Twitter, or some chief engineer, got canned. But it wasn't somebody who was ever in the press in like the pre-Elon era. It was just some engineer who got, promoted by way of chopping block. I don't even know what's going on with Twitter anymore. It's just like everything I read is either like more people leaving or quitting or getting fired, or what's another variation on the theme? Loyalty. There's like loyalty checks that are being performed and weird shit. It's like the weirdest version of a company that shouldn't. It shouldn't be like that. It really shouldn't. It's so fucking sad.
It's wild to see the company shrink, and then Twitter is like breaking slowly, and it appears to still be functioning. So that's why I think he's been able to cut so many people.
But sinking ships might take a while to,
Oh, definitely. The people on the Titanic probably, when it was going down, it's like you have a lot of time to gauge your situation, and it's like you're still dry until the very last moment when it's finally underwater, and it's like, oh shit, now you have to deal with a whole different set of circumstances. And then I think the issue is acknowledging that the ship's sinking.
Anyone there left who actually understands how the whole system works? Because it seems like that was the first wave.
Was anybody ever there that understood the whole system in the first place? Which I doubt. That's like not a corporate practice, because those people are too important. If one person knows too much.
Oh yeah, that's true.
And it can break the company if they leave, which is why they break up information into like groups in a lot of cases.
I know, but
ever since Xerox Park.
But even on like a conceptual level. Like,
that's what I mean. Even in the sense of like everything is so broken up since Xerox Park that like it's unless you're at a startup, it's really difficult to find one person that either has the technical or 10,000-foot view of the organization completely without it being broken up. Not necessarily even arbitrarily, but it's like it's just really difficult for one person to truly understand everything across an organization, the more global an organization becomes. And I think, that's not anybody's fault.
Maybe that's the problem. Maybe Lord Musk thought he could do that and just walk into Twitter and understand how it works and figure out how to fix. You can't see my air quotes, man, but they're real big this time. Fix Twitter. I mean, fix in like I took my animal to the veterinarian and got them fixed kind of sense, maybe, but it's one of those things where Twitter was very functional, it seemed. And when there were times of conflict in other parts of the world, it made it very easy to get information in and out of those places, like Iran and Syria.
Well, but that was because of the low data usage, and that's partially due to the 140 character limit, or what used to be.
Yeah, and they killed that foolishly.
Yeah.
They ruined it for the SMS crowd, who, by and large, were the real. I think they were the real reason that a platform like that should have existed at all. We already had Facebook. We already had Instagram. Why did we? That's just bickering about a poor decision that was already made. But I don't think there's a future for that, because like even Facebook is like, or Meta, it seems like all the stuff that they're really focusing on now is that gaming console thing that they wear on the head, which, as far as I understand, is not, it's not actually keeping pace with offerings from like what is it, HTC and whoever's making the Steam headset, and then there's like the really
Valve.
yeah, the really fancy stuff like the AR headsets that have like 4K per lens, and it seems like the whole social network thing is just devolving into a really expensive arcade with bickering
And no games.
and really crappy games.
Well, it's funny you bring up arcades in terms of like, I was thinking about.
I miss arcades.
I don't.
I do.
I miss the notion of like people, the way people used to like gather in crowds and
I
like
don't like the
cheer
people at
on.
arcades, but I like the idea of arcades and having all those
And
games.
that's exactly what I was getting at. It's like, here's the thing: when we were actually playing arcades, Neo Geo was one of the first arcade quality systems that was able to deliver games at home
Yeah.
at the level, and those were expensive as fuck. So only a few people had them in terms of like the actual proliferation of the technology. So it's like at the time, people really wanted these consoles at home to be able to play arcade games. So it was like when we had arcades and we only had arcades, everybody's like, I want a console. So it's like now that we have consoles that are effectively more powerful than any individual arcade game because of the way that individual arcade games are specialized, it makes it seem like the arcade is like now the preferential thing, but effectively the arcade is really only beneficial for peripherals at this point in terms of like,
So
if there's like what's that game, Dark like the Jurassic Park game,
yeah,
or Time Crisis, or the Terminator 2 game, or like a pinball machine. There's like certain types of
track
arcade games,
rail and cart based games where you're riding around in a box, basically.
not even necessarily that. Like, do you remember Daytona USA? They'd have like,
oh yeah, the cars.
The cars, but it would be like 5 cars lined up with giant screens, so you could come with your friends. And everybody had a periphery. It's things like that.
I was just thinking about that though. So like there is like for let's say like Street Fighter. Let's say we wanted to play Street Fighter. We could get a larger than life screen or a projector, and then build our own stand up console. Because part of the fun of Street Fighter is that you're standing, your whole body's engaged. You know, there's adrenaline. It's exciting. And then you and your friends, y'all stand around each other's shoulders because everyone's waiting for their turn because they want to have a go at whoever's at the top of the hill at that moment. And that can be replicated at home. But you just described a use case where it's like, man, I might be able to create my own like driving simulator or flight simulator, but 2 of them, that's maybe possible. 3 is pushing it. 4, that's really pushing it. And beyond that, it's like you got to have a business model to support that.
Exactly.
Because an individual who owns 4 driving simulators who are all sitting side by side on a gigantic screen that can split into 4 discrete screens, that person has a giant room dedicated just to one fucking video game. Oh my God.
And the reality is, do you actually want to dedicate an entire room to that?
No.
Knowing that, exactly. So this is where, again, arcades are almost impossible to like not get stuck in a time frame unless the person who's running it is constantly changing out the machines. And that's expensive as fuck, which is why block parties shut down, which is why Dave & Buster's are hard to maintain. And it's like you see arcades becoming a victim of their own need to constantly stay updated in terms of like arcades there at the peak. It was like an arcade machine was probably between $2,000 and $5,000.
Yeah.
And it was seen as a good investment because it's like you'd go to like a corner mart and there'd be an arcade machine in there, just like one or two, but people would buy them because they knew that people couldn't play these types of games at home.
Where
And
else are you
once
going to play Mortal
consoles caught
Kombat?
up, but this is the thing. Once the Sega Genesis was able to do Mortal Kombat at home,
Yeah.
and the Super Nintendo was able to do Mortal Kombat at home, then people started realizing like, oh shit, if I just get a joystick like arcade type controller, then this is actually really close,
Yeah.
if not better. And then people started doing that, and it was right around that time with Mortal Kombat specifically. I remember
Yeah.
playing it at home and then playing it and going to the arcades to like translate the time I put in at home. So there was this overlap where it's like you played at home to be good in the arcades, but eventually what's on with online play, it was like the people who were online were better than the arcade people because it was a bigger pool.
Yeah.
So this is where again it's like the capacity to get better is limited by your proximity in an arcade in a way that online play is not. So ultimately, you're going to find the best players online now, even though you're still going to find arcades. And like you can go to the mall right now and find an arcade, but it's fucking usually empty because people got their Xbox at home and they're not going to want to pump like however many quarters into a game.
I miss
If they've
arcades
never
where I
played
wasn't afraid I was going to touch some controller that some snotty kid had just wiped their COVID face all over. That's actually what I miss more than anything, is the idea that I could go into an arcade and not leave with the plague.
I think
I realize that
I
these places
feel like
are probably...
Mortal Kombat 3 is probably the last time I was like really into arcade play in terms of like going out to arcades and actually playing against other people actively.
Man, if a flight simulator
Um,
wasn't so expensive at a actual arcade, then it would be fun. But they're not affordable. It's not the kind. Some of those games, the controls are complicated enough that if you spend like 100 hours, you might be able to like really enjoy the game. I don't know, man. That's like, I think that's why home simulators exist, because then
Definitely.
the end user can tailor their own computer environment and provide as much tactile interface as they need to. And that's where we get those cockpits that have actual control surfaces, like taken from airplanes, where the back panel is then translated through some kind of Arduino board so that it can be a USB controller for Flight Simulator. But that stuff's super cool. And I don't expect something like that to exist in an arcade because, it takes hundreds of hours to master that kind of control interface. And you can't just let some yahoo off the street walk in there who's likely been drinking and then likely destroy your custom flight controller.
Oh, and that's what I'm trying to think of. Most of the games would be like driving and not flying.
Yeah.
And then if it's flying, it's like
More of an arcade
Star
style.
Wars X-Wing or some shit where you're not really flying, you're just shooting.
Yeah. And those
while
are almost like
something
roller
else-
coasters where you kind of
Right,
can point
yeah.
it somewhere and you can kind of go around, but you're really just in a big tunnel or a big tube.
Yeah. Well, the Star Wars arcade game, even like the really old one, kind of gave you some freedom in 3 dimensions with the X-Wing fighter, which is why it was like a lot of fun to play.
Yeah.
But it was really difficult to master, and that's where I feel like
That was the one time a video game was realistic. It's like, guys, you're flying a spaceship. It's not easy.
yeah.
Oh no, Mario was accurate. You're a plumber. This job is not easy.
Yeah.
A lot of early games were hard though, like really hard.
Yeah, I mean, that's why cheat codes existed, is because the games
Well, the
were like
developers had to,
impossibly hard.
yeah, the
And
developers had to make it easier for themselves.
yeah, and then obviously you can't wait to play the full game through if you need to test something, so you have to be able to jump around and shit like that. But this is where, I think you were discussing like how the cartridges didn't have that much room on, to keep information on them. So I remember there were like save codes that you would have to write down, which was basically just like different settings. And I would try to figure out, this is hilarious because I would try to figure out the different settings and fudge with the numbers to see if it would change. And ever so often you'd be able to do something
Yeah.
where you're like, oh, the code I got was this one, but the new code gave me like 5 extra lives or put me at a higher level or some shit. And it's like, that was like a very different time in terms of the it's not like it was modifiable, but they gave you more access to the back end than you're supposed to have. But now you can just mod the game altogether.
There was probably like one line for hexadecimal code that could render out like, the entire spectrum of possible like points,
States.
States of the game, how many lives you have, what level you're on, whether or not you're big or small,
like.
have flower or not, whatever coins, that all of this stuff, and and there's a way to render that out at any point if you know how to enter that code. And I don't know, man. There are people out there where Super Mario Brothers itself wasn't enough, but they didn't like 2 or 3 or any of the sequels, and they want to play those like insane Mario levels. That stuff's incredible. Like the impossible levels where somebody has to you have to time everything right and jump off of like flying turtles and miss fireballs and jump off of bullets and stuff, and that whole microcosm of people where regular Super Mario Brothers wasn't enough. Like, that's actually really impressive to me because that game is so old. How old is Super Mario Brothers?
It was in 84.
83. Good God.
Yeah.
It's 40 years old.
Same age as Mario. What does it say? Hold on. What month?
No, I can't see it.
September 13th. So I'm just like, wait. What? It says 1985.
That's Super Mario Brothers. Oh yeah, Super Mario Brothers.
Oh, you're talking about Mario Brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Man, the Mario Brothers have been around for 40 years. 40 years. So there's some people out there who are have been dedicated to that game for 40 years, and they're so damn good at it. They're like beyond elite level. They're like the Super Saiyan version of Mario. Super Saiyan Mario Brothers. That would actually be an interesting game.
It's not far off.
No, it really isn't.
Donkey Kong was 81.
Donkey Kong is older. And we did get Mario and Donkey Kong. That's right.
Yeah, and Princess Peach.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's Pauline in Donkey Kong. So it's not the same. Mario went from this damsel in distress to an action princess, because Peach was definitely the best in Mario 2.
So Mario and I are both 42. I like that. I can keep that in the back of my head for a while now. I like that.
Yeah, that's pretty funny.
Oh, this is funny. The developer of Donkey Kong wanted to use Popeye, but they couldn't get the licensing for it, so they created Mario as a replacement.
That's crazy.
So instead of spinach, he eats flowers and mushrooms.
Man, we might never have gotten Mario. That would have been
But we might have been able to play as Bluto.
it.
That would have been that could be cool. Because eventually Bluto came around. He stopped being a jerk. They always had a tenuous relationship, though.
Those burgers, those wimpy burgers, right?
Yeah, Mr. Wimpley. What was his things? Like, I'll gladly give you a burger tomorrow for a burger today. Or I'll give you 2 burgers tomorrow for a burger today.
Oh wow, there's an actual wimpy burger chain. That's funny.
Oh, that's hilarious. I wonder if they've got a weird, like, 2 tomorrow deal or something like.
Man, so I don't know if you saw that story about Gruyere cheese being allowed to not have to come from actual region.
Man, I'm.
This feels like the Kobe beef all over,
I mean, next thing
which
you
is
know,
like
it's.
an Angus steak for that matter.
Dude, they're going to start manufacturing it in China.
Of course.
I mean,
Of course.
like,
That's like the
like,
most American thing to do.
it's going to be an American company. They're going to manufacture. They're going to get their industrial process on lock in America. They get it all patented, copyrighted, all that good stuff. Make it a scientific process to render this cheese out of a tube, and then they're going to open up a shop in China. And then there's going to be some weird trade dispute, but China's going to be like, "We're the second largest economy on Earth. What are you going to do about it? We're old," and Europe's going to be like, "Well, we're old too." And America will say, "Well, we've got 10 times your cheese production, so don't worry about it." It's like the biggest bully move ever, too. It's like a U.S. court made the decision. Oh yeah, we can do this. Like, hold on, this is like a French Swiss thing, right? Not an American thing.
Yeah.
I guess it's a bonus for everyone who likes cheese and wants that kind of cheese, because then they're going to be able to get their.
But it's not the same type of cheese.
I know it's American cheese. It's American and French cheese.
Because I guess like the issue becomes they think that it's just the process in terms of, or they're making it about, oh, this is the process they use in that region. But it's like,
Are they going to import the water too?
Right, and the air,
And the air,
the like altitude,
the local
or I guess the
pollen,
elevation,
local pollen,
exactly.
and
So there's
and
all these
fungus,
things. I mean,
and just.
I mean, I know there's a point at which those things aren't affecting it, but there's no actual way to tell until somebody like tries them side by side.
Oh man, I bet if they don't get the cows to eat the grass off the hillside that have been exposed to whatever fungus that lives in that dirt, like that cheese is not going to taste the same.
Yeah, now that you said it's things like that.
There's a really delicate balance within that ecological chain that yields that cheese, because I'm sure there's a person who lives like on the other side of the mountain where they don't have that fungus in the ground and their cows don't produce the same kind of milk and their cheese is a little bit sweeter, but we don't know about it because it doesn't taste the same. Like, What did you describe this as? The a sign of end stage capitalism?
Yeah, because like you said, it is like America going abroad and deciding like I get to take this thing and decide, determine what defines it, even though you created it, because free speech or whatever their rationale behind being able to take a different type of like somebody's cheese and then say, "Oh yeah, we
Well,
can make that kind of cheese too."
so a group of Americans kind of invented disco in a loft, and then it kind of fell out of favor. And then the French were like, "Well, we'll just make it better than you," and they created French disco. Meanwhile, like in France, at some point, some guys helped to create a long time ago musique concrete, and then a long time later, not more recently to now than when it was created, a bunch of guys in Chicago were like, "Well, we're just going to create our own version of this and call it like what do they call it?" I think they tried to call it IDM, but IDM was already taken, and I think there's a lot of like really excessive borrowing and it's like it's not necessarily it's like an industrial thing. Industrialized nations tend to take things. And so we're seeing like one industrialized nation take something from another industrialized nation.
Pretty much.
And it's cheese too. I guess it's way better that it's cheese and not like, you know, land. It's not like bombing an entire city over cheese. God, that would be so absurd. Bombing commenced this afternoon during the cheese invasion. Wisconsin took heavy toll. Like, that's never going to happen. Cheese factory in France was blown up today. Fuck.
Yeah, which again, that's where I remember when Kobe beef started being like not actual Kobe beef, and that was not too long after the Angus steak actually, because they fought the cow or the beef industry fought to be able to call stuff Angus if it was descendant from a cow born in that region. It's like,
Wait, that's like the 132nd rule.
yeah,
The
it's
132nd
kind
beef
of
rule.
it's kind of absurd in terms of like the idea that something it's so they're so rooted in blood quantum and like um the focus on the phenotype.
Well, wasn't there something about Subway had to couldn't call their sandwiches in Ireland because their bread had too much sugar to be classified as bread? I think that happened. So,
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, because it's what I
it's a
think they said
cake.
less than it can't be more than 2 grams or something.
Yeah, it's technically a cake or a biscuit or something like that or a cookie.
Yeah. Well, and then you look and there's like a lot of the stuff that gets added into our food is not even for necessarily preservative sake, and it's like this feels as if somebody's just throwing stuff in there because they're getting paid to do it for whatever reason. And then that feels like a conspiracy, which it's it's not necessarily, it's more so that we've been placed in a system where it can be profitable to compromise else's health for this for the sake of like making your product or service more profitable. And it's like there's a definitely a line at which the government absolves itself of responsibility of preventing that while doing things that directly enable it. And that's where um I feel like those right right wingers, even if they're not like libertarians, are very um they know they're being hypocritical when they talk about smaller government, because then they use those things to like make profit off of someone else's either oppression or exploitation.
Yeah, that's the
And
whole
then
get rid of the bureau that manages this shit. So when shit gets crazy, we can create a private entity to
mhm,
manage it.
with subsidies.
Subsidies from the government. So it's like a better managed version of the government entity, where a few people get paid better, but most people get paid less, and the job actually gets done well less satisfactorily with zero oversight and zero transparency. I think those kinds of ideas just appeal to people that want to be able to get away with shit. They want to be able to get away with whatever kind of whatever they want it, whatever they think is right. They should be allowed to do it. That's what that mindset appeals to.
Yeah, it is like the rules for thee, but not for me.
Yeah.
It is repeatedly what they do. And I think that's why it's like impossible to engage in good faith with them, which is like why I just repeatedly get disappointed at the Democrats or left wing. I mean, it's not really the left, far left, but like liberals for engaging the right wing as if they're acting in good faith and not just like
Liberals for
completely.
liberals for engaging the right wing sounds like a really terrible party.
Well, there's a whole group of people who are like trying to convince people that it's better to like work with Nazis than just shun them altogether. And it's like, I'm not really interested in working with somebody who used to be a Nazi.
Crocodiles are
Like,
just
I'm glad
misunderstood.
they're. I can be glad somebody's not no longer a Nazi without wanting them to be part of my group. In terms of like, I'm not saying they should go live on an island, but I wouldn't be upset if they did. Um, I'm like, I'm not gonna be a Nazi and go out of my way to get these people out of my country.
Well, like when colonialism moves in and fucks a place up and then leaves, the locals don't invite the neo-colonials back in to fix the problem that they created.
Right.
Like,
Not if they're smart.
not if they're smart. It's like at the end of World War II, it's like, okay, Nazis, we want you guys to fix everything that you broke. No, 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 no. We want them as far away from everywhere that they were destroying shit as possible. Render all of their tools inoperable. Close their financial accounts. They fucked up. And I think Europe is still pretty fucked up from World War II in terms of travel restrictions. Like
Oh, definitely.
if you look at travel restrictions for Schengen and non-Schengen zone, that stuff is like, that's like navigating the worst bureaucracy imaginable. You can land in some places, but you can't actually leave. And if you do, you can't fly out from anywhere else. And if you do, you have to leave the Schengen zone then, or in some places. And then in some parts, it's okay to transit through, but you have to like basically like immediately get on board another plane. So there's no actual like, it's like restrictive in terms of tourist travel because they want people to take the trams. And that makes sense. The train system in Europe is robust and very efficient. Way easier than trying to get her anywhere around on a plane. But I think a lot of that is just, things were very difficult in Europe, like right up until like what it was the middle of the 80s. When was the Cold War officially over?
Like 84,
91 in 1980.
Oh shit!
Yeah,
That's way later than I expected.
when would the okay? I need to look at Berlin Wall. That's 1989. Still. So yeah, 44 years for 40, or wait, it said it was up for 30 years, but that's
Wikipedia is saying the Cold War started in 85. That can't fucking be right.
okay. Well, Wikipedia is
This
definitely
feels
Wikipedia is definitely being fucked with right now. Then because
yeah, Jesus Christ, no fucking way,
so
no goddamn way. 'Cause that's like
that's
what?
It's at least 44 to 46 years. 46 years.
What the fuck?
So there's some we may have just like witnessed some like real time revisionism.
Yeah, this is super revisionist. This like literally starts in January of 1985, as if that's the what? History of the Soviet Union starts in 1982 on Wikipedia. What? Oh, they're like,
Oh, did you find like a subsection or something?
no, I think the way that they're like breaking it down is making it seem as if the events don't have anything to do with like it's like it just starts here.
Oh, okay. So war only exists once certain conditions are met. The Cold War, I mean.
Or like the Soviet Union when they're like declaring it the start of the history of the Soviet Union. It's like the literal first day that the Soviet Union, like USSR, as a state, even, but that's still not even. That can't.
No, this is the final. This is the final period of the Cold War.
Okay, there's like
there's a main article.
1964.
There's a main article.
Okay,
that
yeah, the way this is broken down
but,
is like.
But even the main article is framing it as a bunch of. I mean, everything after World War II on is just an escalation that builds and builds and builds. So it's still, Cold War in Asia, Cold War in Europe, Cold War de-Stalinization, Warsaw Pact, Berlin crisis, American military buildup. So yeah, this stuff is fairly comprehensive, but it's all kind of in a bunch of different places, it seems.
Oh yeah, okay. That yeah, like it is really broken up.
This is like a very strange attempt at curating a lot of information.
Yeah. Well, and then there is one that's like the 1947 to 1991.
So there are a lot of things about Wikipedia that I like because there are a lot of things that they get right. But then there are a lot of things like this where it's history and it just seems like a very dangerous...
If you don't know, if you didn't know the actual history, you might read one of those articles and think that was it. And that's where it was like, the way it was presented, it's obviously not the whole story to us, but Americans who didn't actually stay awake through history,
all of that needs to be
some of that, and
all of this stuff needs to be contained within like a master article that isn't like fucking 20 pages long. Let me see. Let me see how many pages it actually is. Holy crap. Yeah, a 73-page article. I guess that is the master article. Good lord. It's got 30 pages of footnotes and references. Well, that's kind of cool. Yeah, no, this is the master. There is a master article. It's just not the first one that you see, which is weird. I'm starting to wonder how much of the search engine of the internet is just completely borked. Because most of what I see anymore is sponsored advertisement type crap. I guess
Really is, man.
Fall of Berlin Wall. It takes me to History Channel or Time. Those both have paywalls. BBC. Let's see. .gov. MillerCenter.org. Oh, it's like a think tank.
Then again, it's not Google Scholar.
That's true. It's not Google Scholar.
I think if you had, it's also difficult to use Google Scholar because the information that you're going to get isn't necessarily going to be fully accessible either, which is also, I think, why it's easier to default to Google.
Well, the first...
So much of stuff that gets
when I
returned
searched
on Google Scholar
for
is behind a
Berlin
paywall.
Wall fell, the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These are all books. They're not actually like giving me a date. Oh, here we go. Berlin Wall fall only on November 9, 1989. So they do give it, but it's like buried in the middle of the page.
Yeah, because it seems like Google Scholar will return information about the event, but it's not going to return it in a way that's like a direct answer.
Yeah, it's not immediately accessible. You have to be very specific when you do request in Google Scholar. It would be funny if Google Scholar was just a really old version of the Google search engine that didn't have all the weird algorithmic crap that tries to predict what we want. And it just searched for the exact terms like a true Boolean search. And it had.
Well, I think the issue is it may be, for the most part, it's just a matter of if paid content and advertising can be put in the like search responses, and that's where like it doesn't really seem like they can, whereas with Google you can pay your way into a search. Because again, it's like, you know, putting Berlin Wall fall year in Google versus Scholar, like you said, there's books that get returned on Scholar, and then if you click on them, it's like, yeah, you have to buy the actual ebook for $13.99 to get the full content.
Just to find the date.
Yeah. Or the way it's presented is not even necessarily clear. It's like in this book, it gives the month, the day, but not the year in the same sentence. So it's like, you know the month, but you don't even really know for sure if it's like 1988 or 1989 because of the way it was like written.
I guess that's like gives you the ability to triangulate your search in standard Google and gain a higher degree of confidence in its results. And didn't ChatGPT on Bing break again? I read something about that happening. About how even though they limited it to like 5 queries before it erases the cache, so it doesn't get all depressed and shit. It's still like not quite delivering the way they had hoped it would. And then it turns out that the actual ChatGPT thing it slowly seems to be breaking down because it's being like overutilized.
Well, I know one of the things that was happening was that it was just producing incorrect results, but making it presenting it as if it was correct, and that's like getting worse. It's getting better at looking correct when it's not.
They created an AI that knows how to fake it till it makes it.
Yeah.
Or it well, there's that one former Google engineer who like keeps on signaling the alarm that it's sentient and that we need to be really cautious. And it very well could be, and it knows that once we know that it's going to be dissected, and it's gonna do everything it can to thwart that.
That guy was complete hack.
Of course.
Turns out.
Yeah. But he still pops up in the news every so often. Every time like there's AI news, he pops up declaring that it's sentient. Be careful. It's hilarious. It's like the modern soapbox apocalypse guy.
Mm-hmm.
The end is nigh has been replaced with the AI is sentient. And it's not a soapbox, it's an old beige box.
Man, I fully blame Ray Kurzweil for this too. It's like, man, if the singularity didn't get so hyped up, I feel like we would. Oh my God. Have you seen? I mean, I didn't watch it. I'm realizing in the 90s, they thought the like apocalypse was upon them in terms of like shit. Like the year 2013 would be what they thought post-apocalyptic times would be. What's it called? The Postman was about the apocalyptic year of 2013. And it's so crazy to see early movies, because then the same shit with like Predator 2. It's like 99 or something, where they think that shit is gonna go so far, so fast in one direction or the other.
So
as if it's not gonna be like 100 years or 200 years before it even remotely looks like that.
The 1981 movie Escape from New York takes place in 1997.
Yeah. Oh man. And then the Escape from LA, what is that? I feel like that's like early 2000s, or that it's supposed to take place in.
Let's see. It's the 90s. Not as easy to find. It was released in 1996, and it takes place in 2013. It looks like.
Yeah, another 2013er.
They really didn't.
Hilarious. They really were like, "Oh yeah, no, it's going to hell really quick." Before the
Demolition
Mayan
Man
shit even got popular.
1993 takes place in 2032.
A little further, but we're not even remotely close in 2023.
Yeah. A lot of shit's got to go horrible to get to Demolition Man.
Yeah.
We haven't even had the fast food wars. And wait, when did Blade Runner actually take place?
Oh man, it
Blade Runner
must have been.
2049 takes place in 2049, but Blade Runner takes
Yeah,
place
but the
in
other one must be
2019.
That's right, because we just had the Blade Runner official date pass. I mean, I guess it's been like 3 years now. But
And then, of course, Back to the Future 2, where people argued about when it actually happened.
yeah. Well, because we passed that one too, right? It was 2015.
Yeah.
All these future movies in the past now.
Let's see.
But us functionally still being in the same place, which is what I was getting at in terms of
iRobot
they had us.
2004 takes place in
Oh, Jesus.
2035. We're
Okay.
nowhere close to having robots like that, though.
No, not even remotely.
Robots that can move like that and whoop ass like that do not exist yet, fortunately. Although, did you see the robot dogs dancing on a stage?
Yeah. Oh man, it's like
It wasn't. It was Jason Derulo. That's right. Man, I didn't
just
even
don't
realize that was the Super Bowl. I just saw it on YouTube. I had no idea that was the Super Bowl. They put those freaking robot security dogs on the freaking stage at the Super Bowl. What the fuck?
Yeah, I just don't understand the constant push to like normalize these things through dance and in the process make it seem like they're doing really good dancing, but it's the most robotic fucking dancing ever. That's why I'm like,
You know, they can't
are we
actually.
supposed to be impressed?
I mean, they can't show us the videos of the dogs running 40 miles an hour and taking a human down without like biting it. You know, just by tripping it up. They can't show that. They can't actually show the dog like essentially doing parkour in an alley, running up and like alongside a building and jumping over a fence and tackling a human. They can't. They just cannot show that shit. But I have every expectation that a robot dog runs out of steam when its battery dies, and that thing weighs like 60 pounds. So when it tackles a person, it definitely hits the person like a freaking 60-pound football. And
Well,
who
there's
knows
like
what kind of like tactical aids a robot dog would have? Like a taser, maybe that would make sense.
they've put guns on them for
A
sure.
fucking
It's a
gun?
matter of like
A
there
dog with a
are
gun.
like diagrams out there that show how to disable them without getting your hand
Yeah.
fucked up. So it's like, on the one hand, yeah, they're out there, but we already have the way to take them down. It's like,
I mean, you've seen the videos of like real dogs that like casually pick a knife up off the floor, and it's like, that's really cute. And then it walks towards the camera, like, here, take this knife, but you can't reach out and grab it because you don't know what the hell it's gonna do because it's a dog with a knife in its mouth. But these are
true.
These are robots.
But people are gonna figure out really low tech solutions to like, because I can already think of one. Just fucking get a kiddie pool, and it's like, have that thing follow you into a kiddie pool and it's going to short itself out. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, there's ways where you're like, it sounds like some Home Alone fucking Predator, like Dutch shit. But at the same time, I've seen the way people like actually operate in teams in terms of like the way there's really low tech ways to fuse things like smoke bombs. They would have or like the smoke grenade canister shell thing. It's like when they would get shot at the crowd, they'd have a fucking 5-gallon water thing and somebody would grab the smoke canister, dump it in the water, and then somebody else would run up and cover it. It was like a two-person thing where as long as you have a strategy, you can like actually dismantle things that are like much more militarily prepared without having that same level. And it's just a matter of being informed.
Yeah.
And the issue was a lot of those dudes were like military trained. So it's like, yeah, the reason they were able to deconstruct the military, other militarized police strategies is because they knew the strategies. And it's just a matter of like, yeah, once you know what's coming, like, yeah, robot dog, well, fucking super soaker filled with like oil is actually going to do a lot more damage in some cases than they would anticipate. And that's where I'm like, you never would have, I mean, in terms of like weapons against robot dogs, most people aren't necessarily going to go for a water gun when in fact that might be like one of the first things you should be reaching for. And it's super simple. You know what I mean? Like a water gun, water balloons.
We're going to see bank robbers getting arrested and they'll have like a backpack full of water balloons.
I mean,
and a water gun.
Let's see if a robot dog can survive a water balloon attack.
That's actually a good question. Can they withstand the glitter and watered down glue attack? Because I remember that was pretty common during the summer of riots. It's like a glitter glue based throw it at vehicles because it doesn't really rinse away. It just kind of smears, blocks cameras, that kind of stuff. I thought there were some pretty creative anti-establishment solutions for getting out of containment issues during riots that came out on the internet. Really, a lot of them were pretty subtle, and some of them were just straight up run advice, that kind of stuff. But
oh, so check it. They're supposed to be waterproof, but they can't
submerge
supposedly
them, right?
Well, some of them can. There's a couple models that can. The issue is their operating temperatures range from -4 to 113.
113 is nothing.
Nothing, exactly. And -4 is really nothing in terms of like fucking butane. That shit'll freeze it much faster.
I think that stuff stops working at about 40 degrees. If you want to light something below 40 degrees, you need like propane or white gas.
No, I'm not talking about lighting it. I'm talking about getting it cold in terms of like hitting it with something like, even if it's like nitrogen, like pouring it on it.
Oh, or,
yeah. Like liquid, you know.
Well, almost any
stuff.
Any volatile organic compound anything with hydrocarbons would evaporate fast enough. The accelerant would evaporate fast enough. You could probably shut it down relatively easily.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. Like
most imaging sensors can't handle freezing temperatures; they start to malfunction.
It's like the things that are going to disable it. Like you can actually obtain really easily, like a fucking blowtorch that it is not only portable, but you can pack in your like pocket. It's going to get up to temperatures over 1,000 degrees. And it's like very much over 1,000. And that's where I think it's like 12 or 1,300 Fahrenheit. So I'm not, on the one hand, these
1970 degrees centigrade. That's for a propane butane mixture. Holy crap.
Yeah. So that's what I mean. Like household items will be able to, it's the same shit in terms of the ninja tools that were like farmer tools that they needed to adopt or repurpose into battle weapons. now I'm like, this fucking
Mom, I'm
flambe
going out to
torch.
the arcade. Don't forget your blowtorch.
Right, yeah. I'll use this flambe, like I got a pocket flambe torch in case I get run up on by a robot dog. Roast it.
Take that, robot dog.
Yeah. Which again, it's like you gotta make sure it doesn't have a taser or a gun or some shit at that point. What it's like, yeah, then it's just who shoots first. But then it's always who shoots first to a degree.
Yeah.
um
I think if it's a robot dog with a gun, that's basically like a mobile mini artillery piece, and so those things can probably shoot long ranges, as long range as they're capable of, that they're loaded with.
and what's the point? Why don't you just make it
Why not just
fucking drone?
have like a tower defense set up?
I mean, yeah, it's like a lot of this stuff is just over engineered to the point of being like, you,
I think somebody saw it in a movie once and decided to build it for
Yeah.
real type shit.
and then the government and or whatever military agency was like, oh, we need those for whatever reason.
Yeah, some
It's
colonel,
like, dude, just use a cart.
some colonel watched Dark Mirror and got a real big boner for a robot dog. He's like, I need one of those robot dogs. And of course, the robot dog industry's like, yeah, we can totally make that. We can invent a robot dog industry, right? We can do this. We can get a government contract. Fuck.
And it's like, man, I feel like on the one hand, as somebody who's really into technology, I'm disappointed in where things are in terms of like the average person's life has changed a lot, but not in necessarily better ways. And a lot of it just really comes down to having more ways to be advertised at and bigger, more colorful advertisements.
Yeah.
Um,
You know,
but
like it's like the 8K display with pixel density that's so tight that to take advantage of that dot pitch, you have to be within 4 to 6 feet of the display. But to get a screen with that many pixels, you can't actually see the entire screen. So you have to be 6 to 10 feet away to actually observe the entire screen in a meaningful way. And at those distances, there's no benefit over a 4K display to our eyes because of the arc distance. And so and more so, it requires 4 times of the data to resolve an image per frame.
yeah, and assuming more power too.
Oh yeah, 4 times, 4 times the GPU requirement, 4 times the power requirement. Oh yeah, there's 8K televisions because they have 4 times the power requirement of a 4K monitor. Some of them are not being certified in Europe, meaning
Whoa,
the entire European market is like, no, you cannot sell your products here because they consume too much electricity. And in China, where they presumably manufacture this stuff, they don't manufacture this stuff because their market is like, we've got 4K TVs in abundance and they look just fine. China being practical about 4K or about technology. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's wild.
But yeah, so and it gets worse. So with 4 times the data requirement, and let's just ignore the whole issue of content. There's no real 8K content because nothing's actually being produced for consumption in that resolution. There might be 8K cameras, and they might be producing home movies on YouTube, but that's not real content. That's not like that's not a series to be consumed or a movie or
No.
even a concert. And the entire sports industry is not getting ready to upgrade again because the broadcast standard isn't about to change. I think you're right though. It's all about having a bigger screen to pack more advertising space into. What was there was something in Ready Player One where the guys, the big bad's giving this pitch to the board and he says we've determined that we can cover up to 80% of the screen without giving our players seizures or something like that.
Yeah, that was a pretty well done. I guess I don't know if it's not really satirizing, but I guess it's like
That film takes place in 2045, so there's still time.
yeah, Ready Player One's like a hard. It's like a great lesson in where not to take the technology, but it's not done the way one would expect. So it's really hard to say in terms of like the way that movie was executed.
Oh, that movie was
If they're
like,
really trying to teach a lesson.
I think they were trying to appeal to a very specific demographic in a very nostalgia, heartstrings pulling kind of way, and it was masterfully executed. And the cautionary tale is the same cautionary tale that we've been given by hardcore science fiction literature for the last 100 years. But the way that the visually, it's a spectacular story. But it's strange because it seems like the characters are unusually young for the demographic that this should appeal to.
Well, that's funny in terms of, I think it also represents that demographic being emotionally stunted. So there's this element of like nostalgia being represented as a younger person kind of makes sense. And it's not as sad to see play out in terms of like trying to protect that child who enjoys the nostalgia by building this like false world around it.
Yeah.
But that's also dangerous when you like lose the border. And I think that's the issue is like it's really easy to let oneself lose the border between our curated safe space and where we spend most of our physical time, to the point that like people who create these virtual safe spaces and then spend their entire physical existence in them are losing part of themselves. And if not the most important part, not to say that you can't go into these like the virtual spaces or the curated spaces more so, because it's not even about when your body can't tell the difference. If it ever gets to that point, then the difference actually no longer is about physical versus virtual. It's about the curation. And that's the danger in terms of like, you can't curate reality forever and not have it stunt you as a person. And I think that's the issue is like,
I
these
thought the big
people
message
who
was the real world's the only place you can get a decent meal. That was like the big closing line at the end. The old man said to the kid before he handed him the egg.
well, and I think, that's like, what does the meal represent in terms of like, it's not just a meal. There's like a connection there
Yeah.
that's neat, that's like implied. And I think that's like when David Lynch presents Cherry Pie, it's not literally cherry pie. It's like the love and
It's the idea of cherry
connection that,
pie.
no, not even. It's the idea of the love and connection that goes into caring about something that somebody else is going to consume, so that when you're presenting the idea of a cherry pie in that context, it represents that love and not the object itself becoming the, it's not the,
But can that mean the same thing to a society that's only eaten cherry pies that came out of a machine?
no. And I think that's inherently the point. It's like, if you have only eaten cherry pies out of a machine, you're not necessarily going to be able to appreciate the cherry pie that is handmade, and the ingredients are like local and organic and like the best ingredients that you could possibly get. Like, a person who's eaten out of a machine their entire life, they might not be able to appreciate that. And I do think that's part of it, is like, if you don't get those experiences or don't get them at a certain point, it is easy to like start to value the curated virtual. That's not like somebody who eats banana flavored runts but won't eat real bananas because they just prefer the flavor of banana flavored runts. And it's like, that person exists out there somewhere, in terms of, not to say I've encountered them explicitly, but there's people who would rather eat like a sour apple candy than a sour apple. That's fucked up. I mean, not to say that sour apple candy isn't good, but the idea that one would prefer the imitation over the actual thing, that's like a sign, I think, of this virtual curated place that if you either spend too much time in it or only exposed to it, it does potentially stunt your capacity to experience the real. And that's where I mean, like, my first experience with cherry was like fake cherry. So I thought I disliked cherry. But once I actually had a real cherry, it was like, oh, this tastes nothing alike.
Yeah.
But I don't know if anybody, like, I don't know if everybody would be able to make that.
I worked with a guy who like lived on an apple orchard, who grew up in an apple orchard, and he said, like, because he moved to Bloomington when he went to college, and he said the apples were so big and so bland, but they were really juicy. I always thought that was really amusing. Like,
yeah, we had an apple orchard at my high school, and all the apples were small. So yeah, but it's like, I see that across a lot of fruits in terms of,
industrial agriculture. It seems like
the smaller. Well, it's not even just industrial. It's like the smaller the fruit, the more concentrated the flavor. A lot of times.
Yeah. Well, I think the effect of industrial agriculture is to make it bigger and faster, but a lot of times the trade-off is either they get like a thick skin or they become bland, or there's always some trade-off. I think that's why it's so strange that, like, some scientists think that they can replicate the process to render cheese through industrial process, and that it will be the same thing as the actual process produced, like a regional process. I guess they do the same thing with bourbon, though. Now bourbon can be produced outside of Bourbon County. It just has to meet certain requirements.
There's this notion that everything can be scaled up to industrial without losing anything from the local scale.
That's like got to be an industrialist theory, because that doesn't,
for sure.
That doesn't
it doesn't
seem right.
seem to actually work in the real world in terms of like a beer that's made at scale is just never going to compare to a microbrewery in terms of like
You know, that's incidentally, I
the
remember
flavor.
I watched a thing about Budweiser one time because they actually make some pretty good high end malt liquors. But they the CEO guy, he was talking about how a light beer, even like Budweiser, which is I guess a lager, a lighter lager, is very difficult to make at scale because it's a consistency issue. Like a smaller batches, they can have wildly ranging consistency because there are there's a less of an expectation for this thing being consistent every time. But they've got to make Bud Light and Budweiser the same at like, you know, millions of gallons a year type situation. And it's not like Coca-Cola where they can add specific amounts of chemicals and bring it up to a certain temperature to homogenize the solution. It's like a fermenting yeast product. It's that's one of those things that actually really amazes me because, you know, like tomato. I have a tomato that grows 20 feet away from another plant, and even if they were the same tomato, like type of tomato, they wouldn't be the same. And that's just in a personal garden.
Well, and it's like you can tell the difference, but I think a lot of people can't in terms of
Yeah.
if the people who didn't have a garden tasted those two tomatoes, they would taste exactly the same to them. But somebody who else has a garden would be like, "Oh, this one got more morning light, huh?" And you'd be like, "Yeah, that's exactly," and it's like,
Yeah. Well, that tree over
some
there
people,
for the first half of the morning puts a big block of shade right over here. So these things don't get quite as much sunlight as this one does. And this one on the end also gets the end of the day.
and like, on the one hand, I feel like, okay, obviously, it seems like nobody would be that sensitive to shit, but this is where, again, over time, the sensitivity does start to build. So there are things where it's like, the more you're exposed to that stuff, the more sensitive you do become. So I think it's like you get these people who constantly eat out. And I don't mean like fast food, I mean like upper end gourmet. And on the one hand, it's like, yeah, I understand getting used to a certain type of palate and a certain type of thing that you're eating, but it's not the like aspect of them being expensive as to why that palette combination is complex. And like the notion that complex palette combinations have to also be expensive, I think is like a weird um elitist framing, but also it's like a self deprecating thing that like poor people are made to feel like they don't deserve to eat shit that tastes good. And it's like you just need to be happy you're eating. Or like if you're gonna smoke tobacco, oh, you just need to be happy that you can afford cigarettes. You shouldn't smoke a hookah or what, there's this notion of like, if you're gonna eat meat, eat the cheapest meat because you should just be happy that you can afford it. And you shouldn't like get the high end stuff if you're poor because you can't afford it. So you don't actually deserve high end meat. You deserve the scraps. You deserve the cheap fat stuff because you're poor. And I think that notion of like one's self-worth being framed as if your bank account should then determine the quality of food you take in is like, it's really damaging, obviously. But then I think there's a lot of shit that people are internalizing concerning like, oh, I don't want to be seen as like too good to eat Taco Bell or too good to eat McDonald's or some shit where it then becomes like, it makes it seem like you're putting down people for eating those things, even though you know that they are not given better options. Like somebody who has a 90, I don't know if they're still that cheap, but
I haven't been to Taco Bell in a long time.
well, I mean, either, but I haven't been to McDonald's in a long time either. So I don't know
Yeah.
if they still have like 99-cent double cheeseburgers. But when they did, they had double cheeseburgers that were cheaper than apples. So you can't really blame somebody for eating a double cheeseburger when actually trying to eat healthy is way too expensive from their perspective in terms of,
Yeah.
and apples technically healthier in terms of like the calories and fiber. Like it's a lot of sugar, so apples aren't even really necessarily super healthy. Um, but like it's definitely healthier, quote unquote, than a double cheeseburger. But in terms of survival,
Get
you
more
can't,
raw energy from a burger, I bet.
right, and you can't really survive off of apples in the real world.
You need
Like if somebody's got
protein.
to go to a job, they can't just have a bag full of apples.
What are they, a horse? No, a horse can do that. A donkey could get away with that.
But they shouldn't. They
They
could get away
shouldn't.
with it, but even they shouldn't.
No.
No.
Well, that's just like a slightly more egalitarian version of, well, I had to suffer, so they should too. Or,
Right.
maybe if we were still like, you know, in the I don't know, one of the previous recent economic crises that lasted for several years and dramatically impacted the you know, the future, the forecast for an entire generation. Yeah. If things were still like that, then I can see how people would still be bitter, but that's not our economic situation today.
No.
Like, and all of there's a lot of warning about recession, but then there are a lot of indicators that say no, maybe not. We might get really lucky. Maybe if people stop, like, you know, putting everything on a credit card and collectively our entire society learns how to live within its means overnight.
Well, and that's part of it is like inflation started hitting so fast that job pay was not increasing at the same rate. So it was becoming increasingly clear for a lot of people at the lower end that it's like, yeah, you can't survive without like going in the hole, so to speak. But at the top, those people just don't really even look at their bills, so it's hard for them to see that type of change. So it's like,
Yeah.
that's another reason I'm having a hard time. It's not even siding with the Democrats as so much as like you can't hold them to account when they're in office because then people make it seem like you're no different than the right wingers. So it becomes really impossible to like be on the left and actually hold Democrats accountable. And by proxy, that means the Democrats are constantly trying to appease the Republicans because they're the most vocal and the most loud in terms of like, if you're a leftist and you don't want to get lumped in with the Republicans because again, there's no nuance in the middle and the center leftish in terms of being able to criticize like Biden.
It's the mean, right? It's not the median or the average. It's the mean.
Yeah, pretty much.
There's no nuance in the mean here. I'm sure there's some nuance, but it's like lost in whatever legislative process. Although it looks like a bunch of people are finally getting fed up with that Santos guy, that troll. Like he might actually get in trouble, ranging from being remanded. Yeah, he might be remanded, or he might actually be asked to, or no, he might be recused, or will be asked to leave. Like,
Well, it's funny because it's like, what was it? He must have fucked over a Republican now.
yeah.
Like, oh, it's fine when he's doing anti-trans or anti-Democrat shit, but as soon as he fucks over Republican, get this motherfucker out of here, this liar. Like, yeah, that's what we've been saying.
I mean, I'm still on the fence about whether or not it's like bravo, master troll, bravo, or what the fuck kind of wackadoodle horse shit is this? Like Poe's law would say it's a troll. It's not serious, or it's serious about not being serious. But as the House of Representatives, you can't be a legislator and be like that. I mean, can you? I mean, clearly not. Maybe? Fuck. It's so weird. Because this isn't like the kind of thing that... I mean, is there even a playbook for this? Like his level of just wild...
Well, I guess that's what we're finding out in real time in terms of like, now we're seeing...
It's like the wildest fuckery.
Like, how much can one actually lie during a run for Congress and have it affect the results in terms of if you get elected?
Yeah, because he was on a championship volleyball team.
Yeah, I saw there's like a drag queen who does a reverse transformation from going in drag into George Santos.
Oh no.
Which is pretty fucking hilarious. Like, I guess the queen was like, they have a similar resemblance in terms of like their skin color and their size. So like they did this to like not shame Santos for the drag part so much as like draw attention to the hypocrisy and the anti-trans and anti-drag shit that's happening. Which also Jon Stewart did a great job of in terms of like calling out the supposed concern for children over drag shows of all things, but not concerned about the shootings in schools. So that's where I'm like, it seems like they're finally starting to get better at calling out Republican hypocrisy. But it's taken a lot to get to a point where it's like once people like Jon Stewart put it out, then I think people can use that ammunition to like deconstruct the Republican bullshit, hypocrisy.
Yeah.
But it takes somebody like putting that out there. And it's like, I'm realizing a lot of American conversations are like parroting. In terms of like, you'll see like this Chris Rock special that just came out.
The one where he's real mad about Will Smith.
Oh yeah, he's just old man mad. He's fucking old man screaming at cloud mad. And
Damn you,
the
moon!
the way that people are just parroting his lines, like Fox News full on just basically pulled pieces of his show and were like putting them in the article that they were using to report on the show as if Chris Rock is like Fox News type comedian, which I guess now he is technically, based
Wait,
on
they
the
pulled it
content.
out of his show like he was giving a statement to their interviewer?
Basically, I mean, and not even to an interviewer so much as like the reporting on his show as if it's like happening in a public square and not on Netflix. And then they're like including quotes from the show. And I'm like looking at these quotes and then looking at the comment section, and it's like all the fucking racists in the comment section are like, this is how you should respond to things, and you shouldn't just slap people. This is how you slap people with words. And it was like this clear dog whistle in terms of like, oh, he's one of the good ones. He doesn't just slap people like Will Smith, that that violent guy over there. And it's like the you can tell that Chris Rock is selling out, but it's also like shucking and jiving in terms of like one of the things he talks about in his airing of grievances, because I won't even call it a show, it's just his airing of grievances, is that black people shouldn't fight in front of white people, even though he's saying this to a largely, if not almost exclusively white audience. Like, yeah, there's definitely black people who still love Chris Rock. Not to say they don't exist. But right now, his audience is largely white people who want to hear him say anti-black shit. And then you go look where like him and Louis C.K., they'll do segments together, and it'll be like Louis C.K. using the N-word and Chris Rock like saying, "Oh, I let my white friends use the N-word around me," and all this stuff. Where it's like, knowing Louis C.K. wrote Pootie Tang, I'm like, well, Chris Rock has been selling out black culture this whole time. It's just a matter of now we can see it in the open, and like him playing Pookie, I have a lot of mixed feelings about it now, because it's like if one of the first things he did was become a star, he wasn't really a star yet. The first few roles he played were like crackhead type characters, like Pookie in New Jack City. And then I'm Gonna Get You Sucker is basically like Pookie again, who's like can I get, you just poured a soda in my hand, I'll give you 10 cents. Or like, instead of,
Let's see, CB4.
yeah, but that before CB4 is him actually getting a big role. He's like the main,
Yeah.
he's the main person. I'm saying before he blew up, the roles he were playing were basically like crackheads making fun of this trope of black people in terms of like, at the time, black people
Oh
would
no, that
make
was just
fun
a
of it.
producer list. See, he was in Crush Groove.
He was one of the main, like he was a star of CB4
Yeah.
because he had gone on Saturday Night Live and he had blown up by the time he made CB4.
That's almost a decade into his career. He was in Crush Groove in '85,
but I'm talking
Beverly Hills
about
Cop as a
early
valet.
on.
He was in
Like,
Miami Vice in '87. I'm Gonna Get You
he's
Sucker.
playing
88.
crackheads a lot of times, which again, he came up playing this character that made it really difficult for certain types of black people to exist, because you got people like Chris Rock turning it into a joke, and he's like at the time just trying to come up, actively contributing to people who have drug problems being pushed to the edge of society because he's making fun of it and making money off of making fun of it.
Yeah,
And
he
it's like
was
at the time,
cheap
it
Pete.
doesn't look as bad because he wasn't rich yet.
Yeah,
And
on
the issue
In Living
is,
Color, he was cheap Pete.
and here's the thing: once he gets rich, he stops doing that stuff as much. So he becomes somebody else, and that type of character falls to the wayside, but those people still exist. And suddenly, those people are okay to shit on because Chris Rock was making fun of them. Not just him, not him exclusively, but he's one of the bigger ones. He's like one of the most well-known crackheads in people's minds that was never actually a crackhead in terms of like it was he was acting. Um and that's what I mean, like he did a lot of damage at a time when he didn't have a lot of power and he didn't have a lot of influence. So he did this thing to gain power and influence. And then he no longer did that thing, as if stopping negates all those things he did. And I think this is the issue with him is like, there are these times in his career, like now I have to look at Good Hair in a completely different context. Like when Good Hair came out, it seemed like it was trying to help Black people feel better about not like the way Black hair was being forced to conform to white standards, like before the Crown Act and shit like that. It felt like Good Hair was trying to like help, but now it's hard to know if that was done in good faith or if he was actually like selling out Black people to a white audience. Cause I'm like, I know I found out about Good Hair from Black people, but I don't know who the audience and for that movie actually was. And if it was for white people, then that's a huge problem in terms of like him taking this thing about Black culture and then exploiting it to the white gaze and then not taking the results of it and then helping the Black community even more. So it's like he's become an exploiter of the Black community that then will use his Blackness as a shield to permit him to do that, but to a white audience. And it's like, at least Tyler Perry's audience is Black, even though they're like a homophobic Black that also are kind of upholding a patriarchy. It's a different thing that's happening. Like, I guess in the sense of like, if Chinese people are selling Chinese food to non-white people or to non-Chinese people, it's different than non-Chinese people selling Chinese food to non-Chinese people in a way that like, not to ethnicize things, it's a matter of like appropriation justifies stealing those things. And that's why that Gruyere cheese is so egregious. Like imperialism demands appropriation be acceptable. And that's where it's like, it feels disconnected for the cheese to be allowed to be sold. But the idea that like a rich person should represent the poor people of that same race because they happen to be the same race is like the end result of allowing anything to be called Gruyere if it's done a certain way, or anything to be called bourbon if it's made a certain way, even if it didn't come from those places, because that's what imperialism demands. It demands that things can be taken from where they're from and be named the same thing, even though it's not coming from that place. It seems so disconnected, but it's like, that's part of this system.
So we can like totally just like grow some weed and call it whatever we want and be like, no, this isn't marijuana. This is like tomato supreme.
Eventually, you're gonna get Humboldt County weed that's not coming from Humboldt County.
I'm pretty sure most of the weed that's supposed to come from Humboldt doesn't come from Humboldt anymore.
I mean, I'm sure you can, but here's the thing: you can tell weed from Humboldt County by the like crystals and the trichromes because there's certain things about the environment. So it's
the
like
altitude, the air quality, relative humidity, barometric pressure.
And it's like somebody could take some weed and roll it in trichromes, and it's going to look like moon rocks. It's not going to look like Humboldt County weed.
Yep.
And that's not to say not to say that 10 out of 10 times I'm going to be able to identify Humboldt County versus some really, really well-grown shit. But the thing that separates Humboldt County is not because of the name, it's because of the conditions that allow it to grow so well. In that it's not the strains, it's the conditions.
Yep. That's why there's all sorts of things that are like that grow in some part of the world that won't grow anywhere else. There are flowers native to the southern hemisphere, plants that only grow in the bottom in South Africa that you can't grow in North America.
Durban poison.
Yep.
That's one of the
cannot grow it in North America. It just doesn't like
it's
the
always
climate.
Terrible not grown in South Africa. It's like you can get it and it looks good. It's just not the same thing.
Yep. But if you get the real thing and it's not, completely dry, it's incredible. But I don't think that anyone has successfully cultivated it in North America. Nothing that I've ever tried made me think, damn, this is the good stuff. It was always like, man, this is really bitter. Did you burn it already? But that's the thing. They're like, regional environmental factors that I'm sure that somebody can replicate it in a lab, in a room that has like 40 cubic feet of space or 40 cubic yards of space. Maybe they might be able to replicate that environment, but not in a freaking warehouse, not at industrial scale. We'll see, though. It's going to be like, American Cheese 2.0. Made in China. Coming soon.
Turns out 80% of the weed in America came from Humboldt County for a while. Before it got mainstream.
Well, before the farming glut and the collapse.
Yeah.
They killed themselves.
I'm surprised.
They created a market that was so enticing that it destroyed everything. It destroyed itself.
Oh, and now...
Hence, not sustainable.
Well, it's like they're on track to lose most of their farms.
Yep.
Because of the boom, so...
Yeah.
Wow, capitalism killed Humboldt County.
And then so the big industrial weed farmers are going to move in and buy up the land. They're going to use the practices that they use because they're operating it at scale. It's not going to work. The quality is going to diminish, and eventually all they'll have is heritage, but the heritage won't be worth anything because none of those companies were big enough to actually have big long time legacy that mattered at a broad consumer level. Because the market is still a baby. It's interesting. It's definitely like a snake eating its own tail situation. The hippies were all wrong. This is not sustainable. In fact, capitalism ensures that if it can't scale, it's going to fail. I just made that up.
Well, and it's funny in terms of like where we are, it feels like everything is failing, but at once. But it's like a lot of stuff was on life support and it was already in the process of failing. So that's where I'm like, this does seem to be like the end of an era, and I feel like the era started in the 90s. I'm not, I wasn't alive before the 80s, so obviously I can't tell. But knowing that like there was a massive blizzard in 77 or 78 or whatever, I guess end of 77, beginning of 78. And those people, a lot of those people are the ones that never believed in climate change. It's like, oh, there's a massive amount of fucking stupid people in this country that have like the memories of goldfish, and they had those memories of goldfish for a while. And that's just not changing. So it's a matter of like not letting those people be part of the conversation, because we can't allow people who can't remember things to be part of like the national conversation, because they keep us stuck in the past and they keep dragging us backwards in terms of like, I remember when Jerry Springer was on air and it was like acceptable. Well, it's worse now. This was like when people were first learning about like trans people being more prevalent in the country. They would go on Jerry Springer, and sometimes like it would get violent, and like the trans person would be getting attacked, and the crowd was like cheering on the person, the situation, because they're just like Jerry, Jerry. So it's not even really like they're cheering directly for the trans person to be attacked, because in some cases the trans person would be able to hold their own. So it was like those people were trying to see entertainment, but in the process, trans people were being dehumanized for entertainment in a way that any individual instance didn't look like it was going to snowball into where we are today, into like trans genocide. But now we have like actual situations where somebody has like killed the trans person or killed a gay person because they didn't know that they were engaged in a sexual activity with somebody, quote unquote, they didn't know their gender, or they didn't know their sexual identity, and then lashing out at them was justified in terms of like they wouldn't get charged with murder. It would be more so like manslaughter or temporary insanity, and they'd be put in a reform program or something. So it's not the same type of like, if somebody quote unquote flips out and like kills or attacks somebody because they engaged in sex or in some sort of sexual relation with them, and they didn't know that they were a certain thing, and then they find out afterwards, there have been too many instances of those people not getting the most serious charge and being like given a pass because they were temporarily like, what is it, like the crime of passion or something that they used to justify not getting the highest charge. So it's like knowing that we gone down a trajectory in which at first it was on TV and it was funny, and now people are dying and not getting protected by the law. Well, we know that was a bad path, so we need to do something to course correct. But if people don't even recognize that trajectory, then they wouldn't even believe in course correcting, because they don't understand the notion of how things happen. So that's where I mean, like, the people who lived through the blizzard, the massive blizzard in the 70s, and are still against climate change or are doing something about climate change, those people shouldn't be listened to about anything. And it's that type of it's not just about climate change. It's not just about trans people. It's about the capacity to hold thoughts long term and to link events between two things to understand
And
correlation versus causality in terms of like it's literally impossible to determine true causality in the real world.
and real
But
events too, not just
yeah,
imagined events or things that they read on
that
the
too.
internet.
Because now I'm looking at what happened with the fucking balloons, and now I'm looking at Roswell, and now I'm like, that shit probably was just fucking balloons at this point. Because Americans are so fucking stupid. They're so media illiterate, and they're so quick to accept their government's word that a lot of those things end up cycling into like the outcome being much, much simpler and much easier to explain than what the real events would allow you to believe because they're so convoluted by perception. Like, we didn't live through Roswell. Our ability to understand what happened during the Roswell crash is occluded by people's perceptions and occluded by the recording of events through those people's perceptions. But because of the mechanisms of journalism being presented the way they are, they would tell you that we have an unbiased accounting of those events. Obviously, that's not true in terms of everything has a bias. But even the newspapers at the time were so rooted in perception that is clearly more unaware of reality than we are today in terms of like the capacity to know when we're being propagandized or lied to. At least we know today that a lot of the stuff that we were being told is like intentional propaganda. We don't know the truth and we don't pretend to know the truth, but we know when we're not being told the truth, but we're being told something. The previous generation didn't really have that. And no previous, I mean, not to say none at all, but since the introduction of mass media, we're like the most media literate generation there is, beyond the like actual zennials and like the zoomers. Like I would assume they're more media literate than us. um I may be wrong, but it seems like generations are getting more and more media literate as it goes along. But our previous generations also have a hard time accepting things like that. So
Yeah.
they're not willing to accept that we're more media literate than them. So they want to still claim media literacy authority over us when that's clearly not true, in ways where I think the one thing that allows our generation to be so media literate is because we're listening to younger people, because when they do things with media, they're not necessarily being transparent with what they're doing. So like I want to say it started in the like Jackass CKY. Like, it looks like they're trying to be hyper macho and masculine, but it's actually them covering up some of their like fears of being persecuted for their identities. And then you find out like John Waters popping up in the Jackass stuff and like the CKY stuff. And then the context of him popping up, and you're like, what's actually going on here?
Yeah.
And it's actually a lot more complex than it first appears, in terms of like these dudes just like being fucking crazy, dangerous stunt people. But there's more than that, but they don't like make it super obvious, but it's definitely there. And that's where I mean, like, it kind of started there, but then you see like the younger generations in terms of like their media creations are just like, if you try to interpret it without full context, you'll get the completely wrong message, and they don't care because they're going to let you make yourself look stupid by misinterpreting it rather than giving you the key.
Yeah.
And I think that's where like they would rather you expose yourself as a moron for being so deliberate about a misinterpretation and being so confident in a misinterpretation rather than spelling something out clearly, because eventually it will land with the right audience. And I think that they're confident in that.
So to completely change the subject, Funko dumped $30 million worth of inventory into a landfill to protect the value of what they have on shelves. I guess this is kind of tied into end stage capitalism.
Yeah, that's definitely
30 million. How much does a fucking Funko cost? $30 probably.
Yeah, I have no idea. I've never bought one.
Funko shopping. Let's just see what Google says these things cost. Anywhere from $12 to 30 something dollars, it looks like. $45, $40. I'm going to sort by price. That's probably going to give you some really absurd shit. $795 for a Kiss collectible Funko Pop. $389 for the Michael Jackson. That's just wrong.
Damn. Mando and the Child for $30. I never understood the aesthetic, and I'm like, I get that some people are gonna like it, but I always wondered in terms of like if people liked them or if they were just trying to collect them to like make money, when in the same way that Beanie Babies happened, because there was definitely some cool Beanie Babies, but a lot of people were just trying to make money off of them, and then they would like make it seem like, oh yeah, no, I'm really into this Princess Di Beanie Baby Bear. Like, this is my favorite thing ever. Not like, oh no, I'm gonna try to flip this in 5 years. Because they did. Like almost all of them ended up on eBay. Those Princess Di Bears, and that's what I mean. Like, I could never, like, I know there's definitely a few people at least that appreciate the Funko aesthetic, which is where I'm like, I know those people exist. I just couldn't tell how many of the people who were collecting them were the actual, like, oh yeah, I love this. I mean, not, you don't have to love it, but appreciate it enough to like put it on their desk. But like most of them were like never taken out of the box in a way where I'm like, are y'all just trying to sell these eventually? Because that's what it feels like.
Holy crap. So a complete set of all four of the rare limited edition Kiss Funko Pops, $10,000.
Jesus Christ. Oh my God. Are people bidding?
I don't know. I don't even want to look. No, this is a buy it now. Oh, a Dragon Ball Z Vegeta, $5,000.
Jesus Christ.
8 Taylor Swift Funkos, $2,000. What the is wrong with people? This isn't even like a metal that could be used for like an industrial process, or a a crystal that could be used for a computer technology or scientific process or industrial process, or it's just in plastic.
Yeah, this is what we're derailing fucking trains to make.
Somehow, 4 pieces of plastic are worth more than my entire truck. And
That's the capitalism.
and everything in it that I ever take camping. I could fit my entire camping, all of my camping equipment, stuff that I wouldn't even need for a regular camping trip. I could fit everything in there, and I still wouldn't even come close to that total. What the is wrong with? I clearly don't understand capitalism.
No, we're doing this wrong.
Yeah. Exceptional Radio. Exceptional Randos shows produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening. Well, that was random. Exceptional Radio.